Hey everybody, welcome back. We got what did we learn? We learned about Cinderella last week and about Grave somewhat and about all the rest of old tales, which was excellent. And someday soon, probably next month, we'll get to Little Mermaid. She is the best of us, like bar none, the best of us. and then Hansel and Gretel, as of 2026 March, do not exist, unfortunately, because they are so fucking hot. Anyway, so we pick up with Cinderella and Anise having a little funny discussion. Cinderella is talking about how beautiful and powerful she is, as in Cinderella, and Anise is being like very like, oh, I'm over it. I don't like you. You and me are not going to get along, and all this stuff. And then talk turns to what's going on with Absolute and Grave since last we met. So Absolute's off getting tactical upgrades. They're all recovered and whatnot. And Grave is with Mana getting repairs from the previous encounter that we had. The new mission is to destroy Behemoth. Shifty and Mana are taking a step back because they're going to concentrate on eliminating the crystal region. And then Anise points out that Rappy is now carrying around 7 dwarfs, which is what Grave gave her in the last story mission. Rappy then has a flashback to when Grave gave it to her, and Grave called her Red Hood's successor, so it only makes sense that she would have the weapon. And then Rappy's like, no, I'm not. And Grave is like, look, you're the one who's got to use this, and you got to figure it out. And if you don't want to give it back to Snow White, like, I'm not going to talk to her because of the whole thing with like the Pilgrims, or not the Pilgrims, the Goddess Squad, and who are now the Pilgrims, right? And the Pilgrims and Chiro, who is now Cinderella, right? Okay, cool. So Rappy says something about like, I don't know, I feel like I want to hold on to it. I don't know if I'm even going to use it, to be honest, or whatever, but who cares? She's a Nikke and can hold like tens of thousands of pounds, I guess. So we travel. Anise pulls us aside at some point and is like, hey, there's Fapis in your blood, isn't there? And we're like, oh, how'd you know? And Rappy's like, how did you know? And Neon's like, there's a what? She explains how she put it all together. Talks about like punching Behemoth in the face with our blood, never wanting Anise and Neon to get near her, and all that stuff. And like Rappy doesn't matter because she doesn't have nymph anyway, and like if their nymph gets destroyed, it could like revert them or harm them in some major way. And we talk about Marion a little bit and all that, and they're like, okay, that makes sense. So then they chat about what to do just in case Rappy cannot get to us and help us, and they're willing to take the chance with losing their nymph to save us, which is like, oh, they're sweethearts and whatnot. And then Anise also gives us a hard time for keeping the dark, like, hey, if we're a team, we got to know everything and all that stuff, and yada yada. And then all of a sudden Cinderella like rolls in and speaks up, and she's like, oh, this is so beautiful, I love how we all get along so much. Meanwhile, Mana is finishing up repairs with Grave, and Grave's like, all right, time to go. And then Mana's like, what are you going to do to help out? And Grave's like, I'm going to stand by Cinderella's side and adore her, and that'll be enough. And Mana's like, what if it wasn't enough? And Grave's like, I don't understand what you mean. And she's like, what if I could do more? She's like, go on. And Mana's like, I have all these spare parts lying around, so I could like upgrade you a bit, because you're still like a mass-produced Nikke, and somehow you survived 100 years and all this crazy shit, but like, you could do better. And she's like, wait, I could help Cinderella in battle? And Mana's like, sure can. And so she's like, yes. And then but she doesn't have a weapon, right? Because the only weapon she was using was 7 dwarfs, and she gave that to Rappy. And Mana's like, don't worry, I got a bunch of prototype weapons lying around. I'm sure we could find one that would suit you well. And Grave's like, yes, but why are you doing all these things for me? I barely know you. Like, what is the point, right? You work for like Missless, the most cruel and cold-hearted like corporation that exists in all the Ark, who loves money more than anything else. And then Mana, like, it's a visual novel, so she doesn't. But essentially, she like holds up her hands and points at Grave's hands, like, when I was working on you, I noticed that your hands, even though they're ancient, they're designed exactly like my hands, or should I say the other way around. So I see my hands and all the technical research stuff, and so I think about what kind of Nikke you were, and I realized that you're like our forebear. That you're a predecessor, and that you, because of stuff you did, like with the old tales and whatnot, you set the standard so that we are still carrying forward today when doing research on Nikkes and all this other stuff. And so, like all of MMR, which exists, is because of you, because of things you've done and set forth. And so me setting you up is more of like a thank you for being there, for being like grandma. And then Grave gets like really silent, and then Mana gets silent, and then she's like, are you crying? And then Grave's like, no, I don't cry anymore. And Mana's like, okay. Back over to us, Cinderella explains that she is a second-generation Grimm's model, which we know from last week with Old Tales, and that there are others. Grave created them all by herself, and they're like, holy shit. And Cinderella's like, yes, she's very beautiful. And Rappy asks, so what happened to all these people? And Cinderella smiles and then says, that's a private matter between me and Grave. Maybe someday I'll tell you more, but for now, no. And then Anise asks, so what's the point? What is your purpose? To Cinderella's purpose. And Cinderella is like, I'm here to take back the surface and protect humanity. And Anise like rolls her eyes and is like, oh, that's your purpose, huh? And Cinderella's like, surprised. She's like, is that not yours purpose? And then we're like, Anise is just joking around. And Cinderella's like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like she is. And then she goes on this like pretty good like speech about how, because Anise makes some comment about her doing the other people's bidding or whatever. And Cinderella's like, no, I do what I want to do. I am my own master. I've decided I want to do this. I want to destroy the Raptures and I want to protect humanity. I want to be a goddess of victory, right? And then she talks about how it's unbeautiful to die without a purpose, and then questions us because it's like, hey, every day we go out there and we're fighting heretics and we're fighting raptures and we're trying to take back the surface, and it's like, if we don't have a purpose, then what's the point? Like, what are we dying for? And if we die, like, what do we die for? For nothing? For other people? And then everyone gets like super fucking quiet, and Cinderella's like looking around and she's like, I'm sorry, that was supposed to be inspirational. I didn't. A bit later, Anise and Cinderella get into it again about beauty and about how Cinderella's always checking herself out and talking about this is beautiful and that is beautiful and whatnot. And Cinderella's like not really defending herself, as in like she's not getting defensive. She's just like, yes, that is the point. And then Cinderella points out that Anise seems very bitter because like she's like, look at you. You don't take care of yourself, but clearly like this means a lot to you, this whole being beautiful thing. So at one point you did want to be beautiful. And she's like, yes, I did, but something happened. Don't worry about it. And we're like, okay, we'll find out about that later, and we will. And that something made her very bitter. And then Cinderella does like another speech about no matter what happens, you can always choose to be beautiful. You can always recover. You can always make differences. You can repent and move on. And it's super fucking based. It's fucking base talk. It's so good. And then she walks off. And then Neon cracks a joke about Anise gaining some weight lately. And then Rappy's like, no, it's not the time, bro. And then Anise walks off and like to think to herself and look up into the sky and all this bullshit. We continue to walk on, and then Neon stops at some point, and she's like, ow, I stepped in some black goo. And we all look at it, like, what the fuck is this? And then Rappy pulls her back, and the black liquid, like, skitters off like it's alive. And then we say, like, oh, black matter. You remember Behemoth and how that thing, the black goo that was covering her and making her, protecting her and whatnot. And it's like, oh, shit, is that what this is? And Cinderella's like, let me go look around. So she flies up to check the area, and then Anise makes a comment. She's like, oh, so she can fly too. And Neon's like, hey, why the fuck are you always fighting with Cinderella? She didn't do anything to you. And Anise is like, I'm not fighting with her. And then Neon's like, you're right. She just fucking tore into you and you did nothing. Tore you up. And Rappy and Anise get like super sad when the talk turns to like having a purpose or not. And Neon's like, we have a purpose. It's to serve Master. No, she says to make Master the king of the ark or the supreme leader of the ark or something. And Rappy's like, well, that's kind of the goal, but we're talking, that's like a squad goal. We're talking about our individual goals. And then they get interrupted by Cinderella, who lands, and she's like, there's black puddles all over the place. And then at one puddle I saw like a strange looking person sitting in it. And Rappy's like, did this person have big green eyes and childlike features? And Cinderella's like, yes, how did you know? And so Rappy like points, and we all turn around, and there's like a creepy looking girl in the water, and it's like, oh, what the fuck? And then we meet Leviathan. Yep, we're gonna call Levy because that's what she eventually gets called later. But and it's easier than saying like Leviathan every time. Leviathan's much easier for me to say than Behemoth. Anyway, so she's like chilling in the water. Cinderella immediately is like heretic and like floats up in the air and activates glass slippers and blasts the shit out of where she's at. But Levy like disappears back into the water, and the lasers don't penetrate into like the dark matter. She then comes up and starts sending water out, and it's like, fuck, run. And so we all start running, and then we crash into like a crystal barrier, and like, ruh-roh, and the Behemoth's like, hey, it's me again, everybody. And it's like, God, you're so fucking hot. And then Cinderella activates glass slippers, but right before she can, Behemoth grabs the glass slippers with her like claws, her like back claws or whatever, and it's like, oh. And then bam, the crystal wall blows up, and then Leviathan rolls up at that point, and then the crystal wall like explodes out, and Grave comes rushing in with all her like muscle mommy new look and energy and whatnot, and she blasts the shit out of Behemoth. And then Cinderella like breaks free and blasts the shit out of her as well, and Leviathan starts laughing and thinks it's funny and starts taking pictures. And then Rappy's like stunned for a bit by like the battle here, where it's like, man, Grave is fucking like tore it up. Grave like showed up. Like, damn. And so with all that, with like shooting Behemoth, and Levy like too distracted being like humored by the whole situation, we're able to like all escape and regroup. After we do, Grave and Cinderella are like, or like, Cinderella's like, oh, great, you were beautiful before, but you're more beautiful now. And she's like, thank you, my lord, or my queen, or whatever. And then they're like, all right, well, let's go back and kill him now. And we're like, what? And then Anis's like, y'all crazy. And then Rappy's like, no, we should go back and kill them. And then there's some back and forth, and Anis's like, Rappy, you never act like this. You're always the calm, calculated one, and blah, 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 blah. And like, lately you've been kind of like pissed off. And then, what's wrong with you? Are you still mad about losing? And Rappy's like, I am, but not because of the reason you think. I'm mad because we should not be losing. There's no reason to lose. It's not right. It's not right, so we have to go make it right. And so then there's some more arguing back and forth, and then everything goes black, and we're like they're just arguing, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, where are we? We're like we're like in black goo floating, and it's like, oh fuck. And then Leviathan starts speaking to us and sassing us and stuff. We float for a bit. And she's like, I'm shocked you're still alive. Like, every human I've ever done this to has died, like, immediately. And then she's like, come here. And we're like, because we're drowning, because we can't breathe, even if we're, like, resisting, like, the decompression or the, not the decompression, the, like, intense atmosphere or the pressure or whatever. And so we pop up, and then we cough a bunch of goo, including, like, throwing up some onto the ground. And Levy's like, all right, time for a conversation. And Behemoth's staring. She's like, ta-da! And so we start off by chatting about Vapis. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know about Vapis. We know you carry it. And that's how you do this. And that's probably how you survived and all this stuff. And then let's double check. So Behemoth, like, cuts us, like, a very little bit. And then they grab the blood, or they let the blood fall on some of the dark matter, and it, like, neutralizes the dark matter. And they're like, holy shit. And they're like, oh, this is, we can figure this out. This something. And then we start, like, getting their game. Like, Leviathan's acting very confident and stuff, but then we're starting to notice cracks in, like, their conversation, and where they seem to be, like, avoiding talking about things and stuff because we're super smart. And so we start hitting them with all the information we're kind of gathering about them, about how they're trying to use the crystal region and the Harmony Cube, because they're shocked we know about the Harmony Cube as well. And the Harmony Cube to make a new arc, and they're like, what? How'd you know about that? And then it's something, they say, and then she says something, and we're like, oh, you're just like Chatterbox. And she's like, you know fucking Chatterbox? And we're like, oh yeah, we killed the shit out of him, we killed the shit out of Indivilia, we killed the shit out of, we beat up Liberio, which is wrong, we never did that. We beat up Nihilister, we took care of Modernia, and she's starting to, like, kind of freaked out. She's like, you did what? Fuck. And then, we start going into that, and then they both start kind of panicking and talking about, oh no, what should we do? And then Livy's just kill him. And Behemoth's like, no, this is good, this is like for our evolution, this is good information to have. And then Livy keeps being like, just kill this motherfucker. And Behemoth is like, now she's kind of taunting Levy and being like, oh no, this is good conversation, this is good for evolution and stuff. And so we press him even more, and eventually we strike on the idea that, like, wait a second, you seem deathly scared of these, like, of Indivilia, Nihilister, and Liberillo. Like, you're not a part of them. Like, you're different. Like, you guys are enemies. And then Levy gets, like, really spooked. She's, shut the fuck up! So Levy and Behemoth, they go back and forth about telling us stuff. They're like, we should tell him. No, we can't tell him. What's he gonna do? Blah 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 blah. Maybe evolution, conversation, something. Finally, they're like, YOLO, let's just do it. So they tell us about their conflict with the offspring, who are Nihilister, Indivilia, and Liberelio. They don't talk about Modernia, which is interesting, right? That's something to note. Even though Modernia has kind of the same theme of names, libertarianism, individualism, nihilism, and modernism, right? Anyway, so they also tell us that they're building an arc here, and they are going to take over the surface using this arc as like a head base, using the Harmony Cube, because the humans have, like, slunk away and whatnot. And that the reason they are keeping us alive and why they're so interested in us is because we've defeated the offspring multiple times. And at that point, we, like, think to ourselves, like, my mouth is feeling a bit dry, like something's going on. Anyway, and there's some, like, tingling in our eyes, and periodically throughout this conversation, we keep, like, thinking to ourselves, like, something, like, we're feeling something kind of odd, right? And physically is going on with us. Let's see. We then tell them about how we defeated the heretics, and how about how Rappy all by herself defeated Nihilister, Indivilia, and Chatterbox, and then defeating them all as well. We talk about Vapis wasn't even used. We talk about Vapis or Vapis or whatever. And then they get super excited because, like, well, these dumbasses can, like, beat the offspring, and we can beat them. Like, we can definitely beat the offspring. That's great news. And then Levy is like, all right, I believe you, but I don't believe you. I want confirmation. And since I can't tell if you're telling the whole truth or not, I'm gonna, like, investigate one of your compatriots, right? Because they're the ones who are gonna have you can do, like, a mind scan or something. She can do it using the dark matter and whatnot. And then they're also going to drain us of all our blood just in case they need some for, like, a Vapis situation. And then we start dancing, and they're like, the fuck are you doing? And then Cinderella blasts the shit out of them. Like, just blasts them so fucking hard. let's see, Cinderella blasts shit out of them, blasts them again as they try to leave, and then Behemoth gets ready to do a super jump, and Levy's like laying there on the ground, all beat the shit out of, and we like take the cut that they cut us with to get the blood out initially to test the Vapis situation, and we hold our hand, we're like squeezing our hand full of blood, and then we're holding it over Levy, and we're like, you better not fucking move, and Behemoth's like, you're an asshole, and she's like, you're an asshole, what are you talking about? She's like, I can't believe you took so low, and we're like, the fuck are you talking about, you dumb bitch? Anyway, she then gets blasted like fucking real hard by Cinderella as well. And then she starts getting blasted by the others, by their girls. They're all showing up too, and they're shooting her. And then Rappy comes over and like kicks the shit out of her in the face. And then that goes on for a minute. And then Levy kind of is like, oh, I can't believe something. And she's like, I'm going to take care of this. And everything gets like super dark. And again, fucking Levy. Everyone's looking around like, the fuck's happening? And we see like a giant tidal wave of like dark matter. And then Cinderella and Grave like grab each other and like move, and they're like, you better get the fucking cover right now. And then Ainz like jumps on Neon, and they like roll out of the way, and the Rappy like rushes towards Behemoth or towards Levy and firing at her, and Behemoth is like blocking her so she can't get to Levy. And we're like, Rappy, the fuck, man? And so we leap on Rappy and like grab her and like roll to the ground, and then we roll behind some cover, and we're like grabbing onto like a pole while holding onto Rappy. Let's see, oh yeah. And then all of a sudden we are alone with the heretics again. And we look up in the sky, like, the fuck just happened? And there's like all these like blobs of black dark matter up in the sky. And then Behemoth and Levy are standing there as well. And Behemoth immediately smashes us to the ground, so we can't cause any more problems. And Levy and her talk about how like Levy's like totally tapped out and whatnot. And then Levy tells us that she trapped the rest of them so that she could scan them, like she was talking about doing before. We then both sass each other back and forth. And then we mention like Anichiro, and they're like, oh, fuck Cinderella, we're not worried about her, completely unconcerned. And then Cinderella just blasts the shit out of the sphere, lands, threatens the heretics. They laugh at her, and she's like, activate annihilation. And they're like, Nani deska? And so she just like decimates them, like blast, 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 blast. They're like barely functional, just these huge blasts of power and whatnot. And they're both like, neither of them is moving. And then she frees everybody else, and the girls all land and whatnot. And then after they land, Levy like is able to like get herself up just enough to like leap over towards Behemoth. And Cinderella's like, I don't think so, and like cuts her in half. But then half of her falls in Behemoth, and the other half falls in Cinderella's feet. And Cinderella's like, oh, that's not good. And then Graves like, no. And so Graves like jumps on Cinderella, and they both like disappear into the black matter. And Behemoth at that point starts to recover, and so the counters who are left start shooting at her, and then she cages us in like a crystal and then charges. And so Rappy, Anise, and Neon try to defend us by like getting her, and she knocks them all away. She's like, aha, I'm gonna kill you motherfuckers, now's the time. And then there's like a red dot on her stomach, and she's like, the fuck is this? And then bam, 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 she gets a bunch of shots, and all the shots turn into like explosions inside her, and she's like, fuck. And then like a whole bunch of explosions, like missiles come flying out and blast the shit out of her. She's like in super intense assault. And so she grabs like what's left of Levy and like takes the fuck off. At that point, we sit around for a second while the crystals like disintegrate and fall around us. And then when they finally do, we see 3 figures, and it's fucking absolute with their tactical upgrade. Fantastic. Which ends this story. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and we'll catch you. I think next week might be the ReZero collab, which I don't give a fuck about. I don't hate it. Yeah, I kind of hate ReZero. It's kind of terrible and overhyped. But we're going to cover it because so here we are. And then after that, we'll pick up with chapter 34. So go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.